Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about depositional landform that develops in the coastal area as a result of the sea wave or action of sea wave. So first of all, if we try to understand that what is a coastline itself, in simple terms, we can define it as a boundary that exists between the coast and the shore, and also it is very important because it is the coastline that marks the seaward limit of the coast. The outline of coast may be modified by the sea waves, and this modification is the one that creates landform which can be erosional as well as deposition. Now the coastline can further be classified into two categories, and there are two ways how we can classify this particular coastline. So first of all, as you know, that sea level fluctuates as earth enters from warming period to the cooling period and the cooling period to warming period, and thus due to the continuous change of sea level, we have two different types of source or coast that emerge, that is generated, which we will discuss later on. Other is the nature of shoreline itself. When I talk about the nature of shoreline, it is essential to know that what was the nature of the seashore before the sea level has fluctuated, before the sea level have changed. For example, whether the coastline was made up of mountains and valleys, whether it was a glaciated region, whether it was simply a low-lying plain region such as deltaic region, or whether it was something else. And depending on that, due to the fluctuation of sea level, we see different types of coast that is formed. So first of all, if we try to categorize the coast, we can classify them into two categories. The first such coast is what we refer as emergent coast or the coast of emergence. For example, if you look at this and the map of India, the eastern coast of India is believed to be the coastline of emergence. Now, emergent coast simply it develops either due to the upliftment of the coastal land or by the lowering of the sea level. Obviously, if the earth is in the phase of cooling, then the glaciers will basically retreat back and thus will have the lowering of the sea level. Second, if we try to understand that what are the major features of landform that develops in these areas, so we have bars, spits, lagoons, salt marshes, beaches, sea cliffs, and sea arches that we have discussed earlier develop in the emergent coast. As we have discussed, the eastern coast of India as well as the Malabar coast, that is the Kerala coast of the western India, both are example of the emergent coast. On the other hand, we have also seen development of submergent coast across different regions of the world, including India. And as clear from the term itself, submergent coast develops either when the coastal land is subsiding, and if the coastal land is subsiding, that means relative to that the sea level will rise up, or directly by the rise in sea level when the glacier is melting, and that will cause the development of the submergent coast. The major landform that you will see developing in the submergent landforms are rias, fjords, Dalmatian coast, as well as the drowned lowland. Now let us try to understand each of these in more detail. So first of all, Ria coast are such coasts that has developed due to the submergence of river valleys. For example, earlier we had a landmass like this, and in this particular landmass, suppose the sea level earlier or originally was up to here. And in this particular landform, suppose if this is a mountainous terrain, if this is a hilly terrain, due to the continuous flow of the river streams, valleys will be carved in this river terrain, carved in this river, this mountainous terrain. And as we have discussed before, rivers generally carved out V-shaped valleys and even gorges sometimes, which is much more deeper valleys. And due to the continuous rise of sea level, what can happen? These river carved valleys may be submerged by the seawater, and that is what lead to development of Ria Coast. If we talk about Ria Coast, these are very common along the coastline of Scotland. The second kind of coast that develop is what we can call as fjords. Fjords are very commonly found along the countries such as Norway, Sweden, and New Zealand in the southern hemisphere. Fjords are nothing but the submergence of glaciated valleys by the river water. For example, rias develop due to submergence of river valleys, fjords develop due to submergence of glaciated valleys. And as we have discussed in the glacial landform, the valley that forms due to the movement or action of glacier are generally U-shaped. And when the seawater enters into this U-shaped valleys, that is what we can see development of fjord. Third is Dalmatian coast, which again is very common along the countries of the former Yugoslavia, such as Croatia today. And what happens in this kind of landform, you have fold mountain in a ridge and valley kind of topography that develops parallelly to the coastline. And as the sea level rises, the valley region of these mountains get submerged due to seawater, while the ridges or the mountain top remains above the sea surface, thus giving kind of island topography, but it is basically referred as Dalmatian coast. And again, in simple term, you try to understand. Suppose this is our coast, and in this coast we have several different mountain ranges like this. And due to the rise of sea level, the valley area will be inundated, while the ridge region will remain above the sea surface. That is what lead to development of Dalmatian coast. The next important landform what we see is a drowned lowland. Drowned lowland are nothing but when there is a lowland that gets drowned or that gets submerged due to the rise of sea level. A series of sandbar like feature which seems to be running parallel to the coast will develop, that we can call as the drowned land. If you look at this particular picture, we can see this is the picture that refers to the fjords that we have discussed right now. As we can see, this is a U-shaped kind of valleys, and both sides it is surrounded by steep walled mountain, and the sea water has entered into this low-lying valleys, glaciated valleys, forming a fjord like a structure. On the other hand, if you look at this particular picture, you can see here and there it seems like island kind of appearance, which is surrounded by the sea water from all the sides. So it is not actually an island, but rather it is the upper part, that is the ridge region of a parallel mountain ranges that has developed in the coastal regions, and the valley regions between these ridges, between this mountain, has been inundated by the seawater. Third picture refers to the RIA, which is when we have inundation of the river carved valleys due to the intrusion of seawater due to rise of sea level or the submergence of the coastline lead to development of the RIA landforms. Now coming to the main or most important topic of our today's discussion is the depositional landforms. So the first depositional landform that we see developing in the coastal regions are beaches. Beaches are generally associated with sand-sized quartz grains that are deposited in huge volume. There also we can find shells and the shell has. But the type of beaches can also vary depending on the source of material. For example, if the erosion and further deposition is happening by the volcanic rock or from the volcanic rock, we can have rocky beaches. If it is happening due to deposition and the erosion of coral reefs, we can see development of the coral beaches. And also we can have gravelly beaches if there is a large to small pieces of stones and rocks that are getting accumulated near the coastal areas. So in simple terms, we can define beaches as that type of landform which developed due to the eroded material deposition which has been transported from elsewhere and then deposited by the sea wave. Now the action of sea wave is also not same all time of the year. It varies on the basis of season, which is called as beach dynamics. So beach dynamics can be classified into two types. One when we have a summer season and other when we have a winter season. Now if there is a summer season in the coastal areas, the sea waves that generally strike the coastlands are very gentler waves having a very longer wavelength, and thus they are very calm in nature. Due to this reason, they move the sand in the shoreward region. That means if suppose this is your coast, during the summer time, what happens, these calmer sea waves bring the sediments from the sea and deposits near the coast, and thus leads to development of beaches. On the other hand, if we are talking about winter season, during this time the sea waves are very large. They are stormy in nature, having very shorter wavelength and higher amplitude, and these waves are responsible for removing the sand from the beach regions, and then they are depositing it away from the coast in the sea. If you look at this particular picture, it will become more clear to you. The first picture here refers to the summer season when the sea waves are very calmer, and as you can see, the sea waves are doing the depositional work where the sediments are being deposited near the coast, and thus it leads to development of the beach. On the other hand, this is the picture that is representing your winter season. During this time, the sea wave has more erosive action, and they are eroding the sand, they are eroding these sediments, and then they're carrying it forward, carrying it toward the sea, and then as you can see, these are accumulating here. So this kind of cyclical motion or cyclical changes you will see between summer to winter. In summer, the sediments are deposited near the coast, forming the beaches. In the winter, the beaches are further eroded and sediment are deposited away from the coast below the sea water, or we can say below the sea surface. Now some important terms we have to keep in mind here that we see in the beach area. First we have is a foreshore. So foreshore refers to that part of the coastal region which gets inundated during the high tide level. That means it represents that zone which is kind of free of water during the low tide but gets submerged during the high tide. So this also represents the difference between the high tide level and the low tide level. Further, as we move away toward the land, we have a region which is called as backshore region. Backshore regions is that part of the coastline which is generally free from the seawater, where seawater is not able to enter because it is beyond the high tide level. However, we have to keep in mind, if there is a very strong storm in the sea, in that case the water can even go beyond the high tide level, and then it can inundate even the backshore areas. The most characteristic feature of backshore is what we refer as berms. Berms can be called as a ridge-like feature that prevents the movement of seawater beyond this particular region, and thus it remains generally dry unless and until it is a stormy kind of weather. So we have berms, backshore and foreshore. The other interesting landform that we see developing in coastal areas can be characterized as spits and hook. Now, spits and hook develop by current which is referred as longshore current. Longshore current can simply defined as that current, that kind of sea current, ocean current, which is flowing parallel to the coastline. So as this longshore current flows parallel to the coastline, the sediment that it is carrying is transported along with itself along the shore, and then further it can be deposited on the beaches, or other depositional feature like spit can also develop. Now, when this longshore current will lead to development of spit, that will happen if there is a sudden change in the shape of the coastal areas, and thus elongated sandy deposit that is extending out into the open water in the direction of longshore current can seem to be developing. For example, if you look at this particular picture, this is actually how a spit develops due to the flow of longshore current. Now let us try to understand this in more detail. For example, this is our mainland, and parallel to this mainland, we have a longshore current that is flowing. Now, obviously, this longshore current is carrying a huge amount of sediment along with itself, but it will not deposit because the current is continuously flowing without any obstruction, and thus it is able to transport the sedimented material along with itself. However, when there is a sudden change in the coastal shape, as you can see from here, what happens? The longshore current cannot longer carry these sediments and start to deposit in the same direction as it is flowing, or we can say parallelly to the coastline, and thus due to continuous accumulation of these sandy particles, sandy sediments over a long period of time, we see a development of sandbar, a kind of island like feature which is called as the spit, which also is categorized as longitudinal island. For example, this is how a longitudinal island or spit can look like, because here we have the development of beaches parallel to the coastline. But once the coastal configuration changes, here we can see the development of the island that is happening parallel to the coastline, and in between we have a water body. In case of India, this picture you can see is the picture of Rameshwaram spit, which is again a spit coming out from the state of Tamil Nadu and has developed in a similar manner. Now, sometimes what can happen that this spit cannot be a straight line, it cannot be a straight feature, but sometimes it gets curved significantly. And when we have the sudden curve, this kind of curve in the spit, this resembles shape of hook, and thus such spits are also called as hook. So the straighter spits are called as spit, while the curved spits are called as hook. A very interesting landform that develops in the coastal area is what we refer as Tombolo. Tombolo in simple terms can be called as a small sandy isthmus. An isthmus is something that we have read before, that it is a narrow strip of land that is connecting two large land masses. So in that case, Tombolo is a kind of isthmus, a narrow sandbar that connects an island which is off the coast to the mainland through the development of the sandbar feature or development of a sandy landmass. It develops when the longshore current slows down, it loses its momentum, it loses its energy, and whatever sediment it has been carrying start to accumulate between the mainland and the island. As you can see from this particular picture, here this is our mainland, this is a smaller island, and due to continuous accumulation of sediments by the longshore current, the sediment keeps on growing and finally connects these two land masses. If you look at the top view, this is how a tombolo will look like. This side we have island which is connected by this narrow strip of sandbar to the mainland. Sometimes it is quite possible that two islands which are present in a sea away from the coast might also get connected due to the development of sandbar, and in that case such tombolos are called as a dumbbell, because if you look at this, the shape is very similar to dumbbell, where you have two islands on two end and then we have a handle. That handle is a type of tombolo, and due to this reason it is called as a dumbbell. Not only that, we also have development of features such as bars or bay mouth bars, lagoons and barriers in the coastal areas. So let us try to understand each of these one by one. So first of all, bay mouth bar develops due to continuous extension of the spit island. And what generally happens if suppose a spit island is growing in such a manner that it is able to enclose partially or fully a bay. In that case, it is referred as a bay mouth bar because it is situated at the mouth of the bay. Now, what is a bay? That we already have discussed yesterday when we talked about the erosion landform developing in coastal areas. So that is how we have development of bay mouth bar. Now what happens, generally most of the bays have streams that flowing into them, and that is why since the water has to get out, the water will also take part in the erosive action. It is very rare that bay mouth bar will be completely closed, because even if it is closed temporarily due to the continuous flow of streams coming from the bay, it will cause erosion of the bay mouth bar, and thus will have an entrance and exit will develop. However, even if the bay mouth bar is able to completely or we can say partially or fully enclose the water bodies or enclose the bar, we will see development of a lake-like feature which is referred as lagoons. As you can see from this particular picture, this is our bay, this is the bay mouth bar, and this enclosed water body that is developing here can be called as lagoon, which is a type of coastal lake which is surrounded by land from all the sides but has a small narrow inlet and outlet from the sea. In case of India, you might have heard about Chilka Lake. That is the best example of lagoon. This is also the largest saltwater lake of India. Now, just off the coastal landform, we have development of island which is called as barrier island. These are elongated islands which is made up of sand which form a few kilometers away from the mainland. And a lot of such barrier islands you'll see developing along the Gulf Coast of USA from Texas to Florida, as well as also between Florida to Massachusetts in the north. Now, if you look at the picture here to understand again briefly that what are the major landform we'll see developing in the coastal areas, we have discussed about a spit, that is elongated landform, elongated deposition that is happening due to the longshore current, and when the spit gets curved, it is called as hook. Now another interesting thing can happen, that if suddenly there is a change in the movement of the sea wave due to change in the flow direction of the wind, it is quite possible that rather than developing in this area in this shape, spit can become curved and then can start the sediments can start to deposit in this particular direction. So in that case, what will happen? Spit can again go and join back the headland. So spit is originating from here, then again it is curving, becoming a hook, and then again after becoming hook, it is joining back the headland. Thus it is forming kind of complete enclosed loop-like feature. And such spit is called as a loop spit. So we have three types of spit: elongated spit, which is simply a spit; we have curved spit, which is called as hook; and we have a completely forming a loop like a spit, which is called as loop. Then, as we have discussed many times from the spit, it will happen that the continuous elongation of spit may lead to enclosing of the bay partially and fully, and such kind of feature is called as bay mouth bar. Then from few kilometers away from the coast, we have development of elongated island that is not attached to the coastline, which is called as barrier island. Then we have discussed about Tombolo, that is a narrow strip of sandbar connecting an island with the mainland. So these are the main features you see developing near the coastal areas. One other last feature we have talked about is something which is called as coastal dunes, or also called as marine dunes. So what generally happens, suppose due to the continuous deposition by the sea wave, a large volume of sand is being accumulated in the coastal areas. Now in this coastal area, if onshore winds are continuously blowing, in that case, the sand that has been accumulated near the beach can be carried forward more and more inland from the coast. And thus, what we'll see accumulation of the sand in a kind of small mounds, heaps, or hillock-like feature. And due to the continuous movement of wind, we can expect that these sand dunes will keep on moving in the backward region. And there is a higher risk that if there is a farmland in these areas, if there is a habitation, human habitation in these areas, then it can be completely covered by the moving of sand dunes. And that is why most of the time government takes the corrective measures and they start to plant different types of grasses, small plants to large plants. Even palm plantation is done here, or we can say afforestation kind of program is launched here, so that it can protect the inland region from the moving coastal dunes or moving sand dunes. So these are the major landform that we have discussed which develops in the coastal areas. I hope you understood the concept behind this. If you like the video, please hit the like button, share it with your fellow aspirants, as well as subscribe to our channel for more such helpful content. Thank you very much.